A couple of Sundays ago, Evan West, executive editor at Indianapolis Monthly Magazine, stopped by to talk about a story he wrote for the March issue titled Alienated, the detailed account of what he called Indiana's most famous extraterrestrial encounter. And the story is about Matthew Reed, his brother Thom. Matthew says he had an encounter just outside of Brownsburg about 5 years ago. It wasn't his first encounter either. He says both he and his brother had encounters when they were younger. In fact, the Reed brothers' abductions are thought to be some of the most famous reported extraterrestrial encounters of our time. Thom Reed now joins us to talk about what happened. Good morning, Thom. How you doing?
Hi, I'm terrific. Thanks for having me.
Well, prior to 2009, when Matt saw that ball of light through his windshield as he was driving home to Brownsburg, he says that the two of you were abducted when you were kids living in Massachusetts. How old were you when you had that first encounter?
All right. Well, first, I just want to make clear that we do not use the word abducted, and we don't use any cornball terminology. We really look at this in a very factual, professional, and responsible way. And I will tell you that we use the word confirmation because to us, that's what it was. Confirmation. But as far as what happened, we lived in a small town in Sheffield, Massachusetts. My mother owned a restaurant called the Tavern on the Green, and the accounts in that area were not isolated to our family. And that's something I want to make everyone aware of. There were sites and sightings and reports from 40 or 50 from the Egremont Country Club are the case of the UFO that was seen, which was reported performing acrobatical movements that were I don't even like the word UFO, but a vessel or what have you was seen descending over our property, and that became such talk and stir in town. Children were drawing these on the chalkboard at school. It was reported on WSBS radio back in 1969, who also just had me on my birthday, actually. And so in Sheffield, this was not something that was just isolated to us. This was very well, everyone was very well aware of it. And so after that, what we saw and what we reported, unknowing to us, was actually reported by dozens of people, and it was actually given what they call a Hynek rating by J. Allen Hynek, who worked for Project Blue Book. And that's how our case got to the point that it is, because it was traced back to that. And attorney Robert Bleckman, who ended up organizing the United Nations Symposium on Extraterrestrial Intelligence about 10 days before NASA launched their microwavable technology, ran into my father when he was running for office. And his law firm was about a mile and a half from where I lived, so I used to visit Robert. And unknown to us, he traced that back and found these reports in Sheffield and actually mentioned our case at the United Nations in 1992.
Wow.
And oddly enough, my father was actually lost his life on the same day 14 years later. But to talk about Brownsburg now and how this whole thing got to the frenzy that it's become in the alien mysteries, uncovering aliens and all that kind of thing. What really happened when my brother, I guess it was something called the Kokomo boom or something.
Yes, I remember the Kokomo boom.
Okay, there were all these sightings and everything. And so when my brother had this report that he made, and maybe it's because he was also very upfront with it, and it's been kind of our life signature. It's kind of our fabric in some respects. I mean, we have had my father actually has a holiday, there's a proclamation in our family's honor in the state of Connecticut and Bridgeport, and there's also a bench dedicated to our family in the city green. So we have a lot to lose by going public about this, but we do it because of the death of our father on the same day. That's why we do this. So what happened was with my brother to go back to Brownsburg, when he saw this and reported it, and people came out and it was reported to officers, and Detective Steve White investigated it and others, there was actually some weird trace evidence to it, they said. There was magnetic fields that would spin a compass. I can't speak for that. I wasn't even there when they found it, but it was reported, and it's an official document. And there was also some low, what they called radiation or hotspots, radioactive hotspots. And we have no explanation for that either. And my brother is very confused about what happened. He had a tough time with that. He even saw a doctor at the Avon Medical Center about it. And I think Evan interviewed him as well. And he had it was very weird. I don't have any other explanation for it. So when it was reported, they traced it back to one of the cases that was discussed at the UN on October 2nd, 1992. And all of a sudden, it's been a media frenzy. And that's really what has happened. And
That's what's happened.
That's our case in a nutshell.
Hey, Thom, here's what I want you to do if you can. I want you to sit tight, grab another cup of coffee. We need to take care of a little business here on our end, get a forecast out there for the 5 days, and, more with Thom Reed, and we'll find out if there have been any more confirmations as we continue on the first day on 93 WIBC. We continue our conversation now with Thom Reed, and thank you, Thom, for holding on for us. Just kids living in Massachusetts when you had that first encounter. Did you feel like you were able to tell anybody?
Oh, no. Oh, my God. We we grew up, my mother was single back then, and so it was not only was it very trying for us to make sense out of something that we couldn't make sense of. I mean, how do you make sense out of something that you're blindsided by and that makes no sense? And we saw the craft. I mean, the craft that we saw, my brother and I had front row seats for. I sketched that in 4th grade at Sheffield Center School, and my sketch hangs in Roswell today.
Oh my!
So we, like I said, there were all kinds of kids that saw this thing, and we talk about it at the bus stop. So there was like a rumble of a group of kids that kind of supported each other and families, and then of course there were the others that were a little more rude to my mother at the restaurant, which actually ultimately caused her to sell it. It got to the point she couldn't stay there anymore. So here we are in this little, Norman Rockwell upbringing up in New England, and it just got to be to the point where there was no point in mentioning it anymore. And we thought really at that point, even though it was difficult for us to move, get away, and we did. And we moved to Connecticut where my father ran for office, and he did 2 terms in Canaan. And so when this happened with my brother, it just, I guess, fueled everything and was very hard on him. And he's very private about it now, too. And of course, this isn't something you want to discuss when you have a good position at work. And, so being that I talk about it because I'm retired, I don't relish in it, like Evan said. I own Miami Models in South Beach. This is hardly what I want to be this is hardly what I want to be known for. But at the same time, I think this is a pioneering type of thing. I mean, there's more money into this black budget and government and private sectors into off-world exploration than anything else that the government is spending money on, and there's a good reason for that.
Well,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, now, as you said, this story now has been told on Discovery's Alien Mysteries and Science Channel's Uncovering Aliens. And earlier this winter, you spoke out to sold out audiences that hear you. And I heard you in January on Coast to Coast. Does it help you deal with what happened when you get to talk about it, or is it just that there's this craving to hear your story and you're glad to tell it?
I think that what I ultimately try to achieve is that, let's face it, there is a rolling of the eyes type of thing when you talk about this, and I understand that. But at the same time, I try not to get into the bizarre or what people would consider to be, difficult to understand or accept. I go with the facts. I try to say, look, we passed a polygraph test. We have 40 witnesses that saw it. It was on a radio station when we were younger. Our doctors have given testimony. It was investigated by law enforcement. There were people that came out from, the Bigelow-funded STAR team that looked into it. And so I'm going to give you and put forth and deliver the documents and the information which are tangibles. Along with that, I will give you my opinion or what I think happened or with the best that I can and describe it in the most responsible way that I can and make sense of it. And it's up to you to take it and look at it and make sense out of it and accept it or not accept it. But a show like Coast to Coast or something like that, and you're on there for 2 hours, they want to hear some color. And so, okay, well, this is what I believe happened, or this is what I think happened, or this is what I was told. But at the same time, I try very, very hard to keep it very, very, very grounded. And my family has a lot to lose. I mean, and I think sometimes I say to myself, well, maybe I shouldn't be talking about this at all because of the little pillar standing my father had and the respect that he has in town and the proclamation and that sort of thing. But I'm hoping the opposite is true. I'm hoping that the credibility of our family and the pillar standing that they have will also filter over into this community or this subject, because I take it very seriously. We're not making this stuff up. This happened.
Yeah.
As far as, trying, if there are things that you really rather not discuss or mention because it's mind-blowing to yourself also, and you question your sanity yourself. My brother says that all the time. You question your own sanity. But when 4 people see it at the same time, children in school see it, and 40-some-odd people see it from the Egremont Country Club and make a report about it, that's not just you. I mean, that's confirmation.
Yeah. Do you think that with what has happened to Matt back 5 years ago, do you think that it's possible that it could or it might happen to you again?
I would certainly hope not. I mean, there's 44 years in between any type of a sighting. People are seeing more and more things all the time, but again, we have a lot of new technology too, so you don't want to jump to conclusion. But as far as what happened in the 60s, I mean, Sheffield was the Kokomo boom of New England. and it was just really, really an active area, and there were sightings. I mean, you had the Hudson River Valley case too that was making a lot of noise, and so there was a lot of activity up there. But you know what? You have Electric Boat, you have Pratt & Whitney, Command Aerospace. There was a lot of military bases around, and Sheffield was just about an hour and a half or so from all of them, and we had 80 acres on top of a hill. So theoretically, if you wanted to, sit somewhere and not be noticed, our property was the ideal spot for it. So maybe it just put things in our backyard. I'll tell you flat out, yes, we know what we we saw, it was not from this world, and we know that, and so does a lot of other people. As far as delivering that and trying to make sense of it and making it come out in a way that others will accept, I'm not even sure what words to use anymore. All I know is I'm going very conservative with it. I'm doing my best to deliver that the best that I can without having it turn into a circus. Unfortunately, and by the way, Evan did a very good job. I was very happy with that. I mean,
he did.
I was holding my breath, but Evan also met me for a few days there, and the people I was with, and I think he understands that this is more than just a crazy tale or a story. I mean, there's facts to this. There's supporting documentation to it. And he said something about trying to get on his
Did he tell you that
internet.
story? Yes, he told us that story too. When he was on his way to go do the interview with you, he needed some. He was out in the middle of nowhere, and I believe he was on his way. He was in Illinois, and he made a stop, and at the same time was checking his emails, looking for a Wi-Fi area, and when it finally popped up on his phone where he could receive this Wi-Fi, it came from, according to what he showed up on his phone, it was coming from the FBI as where he could pick up this Wi-Fi signal. And the Wi-Fi signal, he looked over, and there was a white van that was just in it. And again, your mind goes a lot of places, but Evan at that moment, facts are facts, and Evan at that moment thought, oh, they're following me.
And that's what's really weird about this too. We tell people I had somebody come and sit me down on the front steps of my own home on June 6th and asked me if I travel internationally, showed me a badge, shoved it in my face, gave me a card, made me swear to a Privacy Act of 1974, and talked to me for about 20 minutes. And when I went to go back in my house, he wouldn't let me go in. I said, I've got an iron on. It was the only way he'd let me go back in my house. I came back out. He sat me down and basically, drilled me. And was I savvy on computers? Was I planning on this or that or the other thing? And I gave Evan the card and showed it to him. And I think he went to verify it. And they go, oh, no, we don't investigate that. Oh, well, why do I have your card, and why'd you sit me down on my front steps? And why did I have an FBI agent in my house that was involved in the Sarah Palin email hacker from UT? So do people want to believe that? Would they believe Evan? I mean, talk about this for 4 years and see how much activity Evan gets around him. But my father was a politician, and although he was backed by Senator Chris Dodd, I've got the letters to support that. I think I sent you some of that.
You did.
So I think my father had a voice. If my father wanted to get on the radio or news or say something, he could get the media there and he could deliver a message. And he was also still remained very good friends with Robert Bleckman, who was very active in the subject and who again took that case to the UN with the Parapsychology Society and Mohammed Ramadan back in 1992. So I think maybe there was something that my father may have seen or been told or knew or something was going to reveal. And I think maybe that that is where maybe some of this interest or additional interest comes from. But I can't really say. I'm just this little business owner, and my brother's trying to do his best to go to work every day. But at the same time, I think we have something important to say and deliver. And I think we also have a responsibility to make sure that we deliver it properly for a lot of reasons.
I think it's such an interesting story. That story is still fresh in our minds. It is in the March issue of Indianapolis Monthly Magazine, written by Evan West, and it's a story of Thom and Matt Reed and what Matt experienced just outside of Brownsburg 5 years ago. And Thom, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you.